The 2024 to 2025 winter season was insane. We saw crippling ice storms, frigid Arctic blasts, blizzards, and even severe weather. But this year could get even more interesting. Many different weather patterns and phases are changing, which will set the stage for even more chaos. In this video, I'll be giving you all you need to know in my official 2025 to 2026 winter forecast. To start out, we need to look at ENSO, the El Niño Southern Oscillation. If you look here in the Eastern Pacific, in these blue colors, this is where we're talking about below average sea surface temperatures. This means that we are in a weak La Niña. However, models do predict that this La Niña will fade, and as we get into the primary winter months of December, January, and February, we will likely see an ENSO neutral phase take over. If we take a look at what usually happens during a La Niña winter, you can see the polar jet stream usually spills down into the northern United States. This brings colder air well into the lower 48, as well as we see wetter conditions in the Pacific Northwest and drier and warmer conditions in the southern U.S. Another thing to talk about here as we go into our winter season is we also have to look at the ENSO neutral winter pattern, as we are likely going to be seeing that La Niña fade. And you can see usually during an ENSO neutral winter pattern we see similar conditions to which La Niña brings, where we do get that cold air to funnel down into the northern tier of the country, again with that polar jet stream dipping down into the northern half of the lower 48. We also do see that subtropical jet stream get pushed a little bit farther north, bring some wetter and warmer conditions into the southern United States. So that calls for a very active storm track and obviously much colder conditions in the northern U.S. Now that we know what ENSO phase we're going to be in as we get into winter, we can compare this year to similar years in the past that have similar setups, and we can use them as our analogs. First, we'll start out with the winter of 2021 to 2022. You can see the mid-August ENSO forecast called for a very, very weak La Niña as we got into the late summer and early fall months, eventually transitioning into a ENSO neutral phase as we get into December, January, and February, which is very, very similar to this year's forecast. Overall, the winter of 2021 to 2022 was very significant. We saw above-average snowfall across portions of the western United States, the central and high plains, as well as the Great Lakes region, and even the Northeast. We also saw some very, very significant snowstorms, as well as this blizzard that dumped feet of snow across New England states and the rest of the East Coast. The next year to look at is the winter of 2020 to 2021. This year was also very similar to what we're seeing now, with a weak La Niña transitioning into an ENSO neutral phase as we got into the early and mid-winter months. Overall, the winter of 2020 to 2021 was very significant and impactful. We saw very above-average snowfall across all of the western and central United States. We saw snowfall all the way down to portions of the Gulf Coast. We also saw feet of snow across all of the Great Lakes regions, the Northeast, and obviously the High Plains. We also did see record-breaking Arctic blasts, as well as a extremely powerful and impactful nor'easter as we got into early December. So overall, this was a very, very serious and downright historic winter. Now for our third and final analog, we're going to be looking at the winter of 2013 to 2014. You can see that during our mid-August ENSO forecast, we had a very, very high probability of seeing an ENSO neutral phase, where we did see ever so slightly cooler temperatures across portions of the equatorial Pacific, so a little different than what we have right now, but overall more or less similar to what we have going on as we get into this winter. The winter of 2013 to 2014 was also an extremely impactful winter. We saw very above-average snowfall across the entire lower 48, especially across the western United States, where we saw feet of mountain snowfall. We saw multiple feet of snowfall across really all of the northern tier of the country, especially into the High Plains and the Great Lakes region, as well as the Northeast, where we saw a very active storm track, as well as very frequent lake effect snowstorms. We also did get a couple of instances of snow across portions of the Gulf Coast, where that accumulated to a couple of inches of snow down there for a season total. So overall, a very widespread, snowy, and very impactful winter for 2014, and we also did see a very, very significant nor'easter that brought feet of snow to all of the East Coast. Now, another thing we can definitely consider looking at to predict what our jet stream could look like as we get into this winter is if we take a look here at what we usually see during a negative NAO phase or North Atlantic Oscillation in the negative phase, where we usually do see a blocking high pressure over Greenland and Atlantic Canada, which does bring the jet stream much farther south into the eastern United States, ushering in cooler Arctic air, bringing the higher chance for snowstorms and nor'easters. This also does go hand in hand with our weakening polar vortex, where if we do see a very weak, unstable, and wavy polar vortex during the winter months, we will likely see many shots of extreme cold air move down into the lower 48, which again will just increase those chances for more significant snowstorms, nor'easters, and blizzards. And after taking this all in, we can actually look at what our weak La Ninas in the past have given us as far as temperature anomalies go. And you can see a common theme was that we saw very below average temperatures across the northern tier of the country, mainly across portions of the Great Lakes region, the northern plains, and the northeast. And then we saw very above average temperatures across portions of the southern U.S. and the southeast. And as we take in all this data, it is finally time for me to premiere my official 2025 to 2026 winter forecast. To start out with my official 2025 to 2026 winter forecast, we're going to take a look at my temperature outlook. So starting out here, we're going to look in the northern United States in this pink shade where I'm expecting well below average temperatures. I really do think that in places like Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, the Dakotas, and even the portions of northeastern Montana, we're going to see frigid temperatures. I really do think we're going to see extreme Arctic blasts. So basically what you can take away from this is that this is really the region where I have the highest confidence in that we're going to be seeing some very, very cold and below average temperatures. Our next zone here is in this dark blue shade. This is where I'm expecting right around below average temperatures throughout the most of the season. This is going to be going out for regions like the north central United States, as well as the upper Midwest, and back into the rest of the Great Lakes region and interior New England. So again, this is really where I'm expecting to see mainly below average temperatures throughout the year. And then also, as we get into our light blue shade or our teal shade, this is where I'm expecting slightly below average temperatures, mainly across portions of interior Pacific Northwest down into the Central Plains, up through the Ohio Valley, and the rest of New England and the Northeast. So once again, this is where I really do think we're going to see mainly below average temperatures, but this could definitely fluctuate with some warmer trends and patterns throughout the winter, where obviously we could get instances of maybe more above average temperatures at times, but I do think for at least most of the season we're going to stay rather below average. And then next up, we do have our near average zone in our gray shade. This is where I'm expecting to stay around average here for our temperature anomalies throughout the year. I do think there are going to be some instances of above average and below average temperatures at times for really everyone in the shade. I think we're going to definitely get some Arctic blasts that are going to be big enough to support freezing temperatures all the way down to potentially as far south as the Gulf Coast. I mean, we've seen it in past years. Our analogs show it. But I really do think that for at least most of the season, we're going to stay right around normal as far as our temperatures goes. But again, definitely some instances of cooler than average and even above average temperatures cannot be ruled out. And then that brings us to our next zone here in the southern United States in this yellow shade. This is where I'm expecting slightly above average temperatures. This is going to be going out for really all of the southern U.S. up into the southeast. This is where I really do think that Pacific jet stream is going to bring that storm track a little bit farther north, which will pump warmer conditions, warmer air, and definitely more moist air into the southeast. So that's what leads me to giving the southeast that slightly above average zone. And then finally, we do have our above average zone here in our orange shade. This is going to be going out for states like Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Florida, where pretty much we're going to be talking about the same story, where we're going to get that storm track to bring lots of moisture and warm air into that region. So I do think that we're going to stay mainly above average for this winter across portions of the southeast. Next, we'll take a look at my precipitation forecast. We'll start out here in the Pacific Northwest, where I'm expecting slightly above average precipitation. I do think that we'll see quite a few storm systems strike this region, and with the below average temperatures, these storm systems could pack lots of snow. I also do think that in the southwestern United States, we'll see slightly below average precipitation, and I do think that a significant drought will be possible across most of this winter. That also leads us to our next zone where I'm expecting below average precipitation across portions of the extreme southwestern United States, including portions of southern Arizona, New Mexico, western Texas, and southern California. I know last year had a significant wildfire season as we got into winter, and I really do think that that could be a possibility, as we likely will see a prolonged drought as we get into this winter. Next, we move on to the Northeast, where I'm expecting slightly above average precipitation. I really do think that we could be talking about the return of nor'easters, and just the fact that a lot of storm systems will end up tracking through this region, which will likely lead to above average precipitation for the year. We also take a look at the southeastern United States in that light green shade. We're also talking about slightly above average precipitation. I really do think that with that enhanced Pacific jet stream bumping up a little bit farther north, that will definitely bring a lot of storm systems and just a lot of Gulf moisture into the southeastern United States. We're in that light green shade. I'm talking about slightly above average precipitation. And in that dark green shade, including portions of South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, we will likely see above average precipitation. We then move on to the exciting part of my official snowfall forecast for the lower 48. So we start out here in the northern U.S. in this dark blue shade. This is where I'm expecting above average snowfall. I really do think with the combination of very, very cold conditions as well as an active storm track, this area will get pounded with snowstorms. I think a few major winter storms are going to be possible, and even a blizzard or two cannot be ruled out, really depending on how frequent we see those Arctic blasts move in and how frequent those storms move through this region. But this is where I have pretty high confidence that we're going to see above average snowfall. So that's going out for portions of the upper Midwest as well as the Great Lakes region. I also do think that in this slightly above average snowfall zone, in this teal shade, this is where we're likely going to see, once again, quite a bit of snowfall. I do think that we will see that active storm track definitely help with seeing that good helping of snow, but I also do think with the very cold air settling into this region for the bulk of the season, I do think that that's going to be very favorable to support a couple of significant winter storms. So that's going really all the way from the Pacific Northwest down through the northern plains, back into the Ohio Valley and the Northeast. And finally, in this light gray shade, this is where I'm expecting right around average snowfall. I do think that some spots could be rather below average or above average, depending on how close you are to either zone. But this is where I really don't see a huge change in just the typical amount of snow that we get during the season. But I definitely do think that, again, some spots could trend above average or below average during the season. And finally, our last zone is in this dark gray shade where I'm expecting very little snowfall at all. Last year, I completely messed up on this forecast, so definitely take this all with a grain of salt. Last year, I said that the Gulf Coast was going to see no snow, but they ended up seeing a whole foot. So that's why you need to take all this information that I'm giving you with a grain of salt. But I really do think that, especially with all that warm air and moisture coming up with that Pacific jet stream moving a little bit farther north, this area at least is going to struggle heavily with getting snowfall just at all. But I definitely do think that some quick shots of 1 to 2, 1 to 3 inches of snow cannot be ruled out for these areas during this winter. And before we get into my overall forecast, I do want to take a look quickly at our severe weather forecast for this year, because this is a topic that definitely should not be slept on. I really do think that this is something we cannot ignore. So you can see most of the country is expected, at least from my standpoint, to see a little severe weather. But I also do think that in this red shade, we could be talking about some severe weather, especially across portions of the southeast United States. This goes for Dixie Alley as well as the Gulf Coast. I really do think with that active storm track and very favorable Gulf moisture, we could be talking about some significant severe weather events, potentially even some severe weather outbreaks, or even tornado outbreaks. So I really do think that we could see a pretty significant winter severe weather season. I definitely do think that it won't be as frequent as obviously spring. I really do think that this is something we need to watch. I definitely would not be surprised at all if we got a couple of significant severe weather events during this winter. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for, my official 2025 to 2026 winter forecast. We'll start out here in this green shade across portions of the Pacific Northwest. This is where I'm expecting to see very cold and snowy conditions. I do think that at times we will be talking about below average precipitation, but I really do think that with those very, very below average temperatures, I definitely think we will be talking about a rather snowy winter. We'll move on here to the western United States. It's orange shade for portions of California into western and central Nevada. This is where I'm expecting very dry condition. I definitely do think that there is going to be a very significant wildfire threat. I do think we could be talking about many separate wildfires during this winter. Again, last winter we saw devastating wildfires. I don't think it's going to be as destructive as last year's winter, but I definitely do think we're going to be talking about some serious drought conditions and certainly the threat for wildfire spread. And then finally, we take a look here in the southwestern United States. We are talking about likely dry and mild conditions in this tan shade, going out for portions of Arizona, New Mexico, down into central and western Texas. So again, I really do think we're going to see a rather boring winter out here, but dry and mild conditions are to be expected. Then we take a look at this teal or mint shade across portions of the mountain northwest. This is where I'm likely going to see typical mountain snow. So this is really going out for all of the upper elevations of, again, the western United States. I definitely do think that we could be seeing very, very cold conditions, but also storms could definitely track through here and dump quite a lot of snow. So I definitely do think some typical mountain snow is going to be likely here across this winter. Then we move things over to the extreme northern United States, where in our purple shade, you guessed it, we have our Arctic blast region. This is where I'm expecting frigid temperatures. I really do think we're going to see well below average temperatures. I really do think that we're going to see a mainly frigid winter, but I definitely do think that this could also be bringing a lot of snow into the picture. So I definitely do think that we're going to see very cold but also snowy conditions. And then we move over here to our Great Lakes region here, where we do have our lake effect snow area. This is really going out for all of the coastal New York, again, upstate New York regions, as well as portions of Pennsylvania and Ohio off of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. This is where I'm expecting a very significant lake effect snow season. I think multiple feet of snow is going to be likely for these areas. And I do think multiple snowstorms of really 1 to 3 feet are going to be possible here. And then finally, we take a look here in the Ohio Valley, Lower Midwest, Central Plains, and the Northeast in this teal shade. This is where I'm expecting a very cold and snowy winter. I think if I were to give you guys one area to get or hit the jackpot as far as snowstorms go, this is the region that I would give you the most confidence in. I really do think that with the combination of extremely cold conditions. Again, we're talking about frequent Arctic blasts and that extremely active storm track. I really do have confidence in a snowy and downright chilly winter for these areas. So again, that's going out for the Central Plains, Lower Midwest, and portions of the Northeast. That brings us over to coastal New England and our red shade or our reddish pink shade, where I'm expecting nor'easters. I really do think that this year could bring the return of nor'easters. I know we haven't gotten a few in a hot minute, but really with the combination of a weak La Nina and really ENSO neutral phase, that will bring a lot of storms down into the southeast, which is a very favorable corridor for low pressure systems to develop off the coast and eventually move up across New England and dump lots and lots of snow. So I really do think that we can see the return of nor'easters with mixed precipitation types. And then in our pink shade down here, into portions of the mid-Atlantic and the southern United States, I do think we're going to see our winter battle zone kind of set up here. I do think this is where we're going to see many mixed precipitation types to clashing air masses between cold air and warm air. But I definitely do think this area is going to be action-packed. If you wanted the most chaotic area, at least my confidence in the most chaotic area, I would put my money on this pink shaded region. I really do think that ice storms, severe weather, snowstorms, and even potentially a significant snowstorm all cannot be ruled out in this area. So a lot can happen, a lot can change, but I really think this year's is going to be an interesting winter to watch, especially for this shaded area. And finally, for our last region, but certainly not least, we're going to take a look at the southeastern United States in this dark red shade, where I'm expecting a very wet winter, as well as the addition of severe weather. I, once again, cannot stress this enough. Even though it's winter, this is something we cannot sleep on. I really do think that with that active storm track, bringing lots of moisture and warm air into the southeast, we're going to see a very wet, stormy, and potentially severe winter as far as our overall forecast is concerned. That's going to wrap the video, so I appreciate all of you for coming to watch. Please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel, as it would help out a lot, and I worked very, very hard on this video. Also, please consider leaving a donation to my PayPal, which will be linked in the description and in the comments section below. I would really appreciate the support, and obviously it is not required. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.